High above the Arizona desert sits a 5-story concrete building where guests pay to sleep in rooms where thousands of people took their final breath. This is not a horror movie. This is a real hotel you can book tonight, and what happened inside these walls might be the darkest chapter in American mining history. The Jerome Grand Hotel clings to a mountainside so steep that standing at a top-floor window feels like looking out from an airplane. For 23 years, this building served as a hospital for one of the most dangerous towns in the American West. The number of people who died here has become legendary. Some say over 9,000 souls never made it out alive. Whether that exact number is true or not, one thing is absolutely certain. This building witnessed more death than almost any other structure in Arizona history. But to understand why so many people died here, you need to understand the wild and utterly insane town that built it. The story begins in 1875, when American prospectors filed the first mining claims on Cleopatra Hill in central Arizona. Spanish explorers had noticed copper deposits here as far back as 1582, but they decided the ore was not worth the trouble. They were catastrophically wrong. The copper beneath this mountain turned out to be one of the richest deposits ever discovered in North America. Over 77 years of operation, the mines produced nearly 33 million tons of ore containing copper, gold, silver, lead, and zinc. At peak production, the United Verde Copper Company pulled 3 million pounds of copper out of the mountain every single month. People started calling it the billion-dollar copper camp, and they were not exaggerating. The total value of metals extracted eventually reached approximately $1 billion in historic currency. That is roughly $4 billion in today's money. All that wealth attracted people from around the world. By the 1920s, Jerome's population had exploded to somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 residents. Workers came from more than 30 different countries: Americans, Mexicans, Irish, Italians, Croatians, Poles, Germans, Chinese, and Spaniards, all crowded onto this steep mountainside. At one point, the population was 78% male. That created a very particular kind of chaos. Jerome earned a nickname that newspapers across America picked up and repeated. The San Francisco Examiner called it the wickedest town in America in 1899. The New York Sun proclaimed it the wickedest town in the West in 1903. A Phoenix newspaper from September 1899 explained it simply. Jerome had one small church and at least 16 saloons, with more going up every day. The very first wooden building ever constructed in Jerome was not a store, a home, or a church. It was a 2-story saloon and brothel built next to the water tank by a woman named Nora Brown. Everyone called her Butter Brown. That set the tone for everything that followed. Within a few years, Jerome boasted numerous saloons, gambling halls, and brothels. The red light district thrived in an area locals called the Tenderloin. Opium dens operated openly. At one point, there were 14 Chinese restaurants in town, serving a population that desperately needed somewhere to eat between shifts. Living conditions were rough beyond belief. One local historian described it like this: outhouses stuck out on the back of everybody's lots, and people would throw their waste out. Donkeys and pigs ran wild through the streets. Raucous behavior, drunkenness, violence, and gambling were part of daily life. Fire repeatedly devastated the town. In April 1894, fire destroyed 12 buildings. A bartender had to fire gunshots just to wake the sleeping townspeople. Just 2 months later, another fire burned what remained of downtown. On Christmas Eve, 1897, fire destroyed a block including a bordello, 4 saloons, and a boarding house. In September 1898, the most devastating fire yet blew Jerome off the face of the earth. At least 8 people died. In May 1899, yet another fire started in the Leland Hotel and spread through downtown. And then there was the danger underground. Copper mining in the early 1900s was among the most dangerous jobs in America. The men who descended into the tunnels beneath Jerome faced death every single day. They worked hundreds of feet underground, surrounded by rock that could collapse at any moment. They breathed air thick with dust and toxic gases. Their only light came from primitive lamps strapped to their heads. The statistics tell a story that should terrify anyone. According to Arizona State Mine Inspector reports, between May 1912 and November 1930, Arizona mines recorded 918 deaths and 13,507 injuries. In 1921 alone, 9.2% of the entire mining workforce was either killed or injured. That means nearly 1 in 10 miners went home hurt or did not go home at all that year. The most common killers were falling rock and timbers, which claimed 168 lives during that period. Falls by mine workers killed another 104 men. Explosions, collisions, steam accidents, and fires accounted for many more. Cave-ins happened when support timbers failed, dynamite misfired or detonated too early, men plunged down ore chutes or fell from cages descending into the depths. One particularly horrible incident occurred in 1905. Water from recent flooding had seeped into a section of the United Verde mine where underground fires were burning. When the water hit the superheated rock, it created a massive steam explosion. About a dozen miners were killed or severely injured. These men had simply been waiting 300 feet underground during a shift change when the blast tore through the tunnels, filling them with scalding steam and poisonous gases. Those underground fires plagued the mine for decades. In some areas, ore deposits burned uncontrollably for 33 years. Miners tried flooding the burning sections with water. They pumped in carbon dioxide. They sealed off tunnels. Nothing worked. Oxygen kept filtering into the burn areas, feeding the flames. Sometimes the smoke grew so thick it filled the open pit mine above and made breathing impossible on the surface. The mining company eventually had to abandon underground operations entirely. In 1918, they switched to open pit mining instead. But even that came with its own deadly dangers. Mexican and Mexican-American workers faced the worst of it. They were specifically recruited to fill the most dangerous and physically demanding positions in the mines and smelters. They received significantly lower wages than their white counterparts. They were forced to live in a segregated area called Mexican Town on the lower slopes of the mountain. Amputations from mining accidents were so common that a man missing fingers, a hand, or even an arm attracted little notice. Many miners had body parts removed either from accidents or to prevent infections from spreading. The hospital saw these cases every single day. Surgeons became experts at cutting off limbs just to keep men alive. And then, in 1918, something even worse arrived. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1919 was one of the deadliest events in human history. Unlike most flu strains, which kill the very young and very old, this one had a terrifying preference for healthy young adults. It could kill a strong man in 24 hours. When the flu reached Jerome in October 1918, the results were catastrophic. By mid-October, 125 people in the small mining town had fallen ill. 21 were already dead. All of them were between 25 and 32 years old. The prime of their lives cut short by a virus nobody understood. Within weeks, over 320 cases had been reported. The hospital was overwhelmed completely. The original 1917 hospital filled to capacity almost immediately. Temporary beds had to be set up in public school buildings. The town instituted a strict quarantine on October 15, 1918. Everyone was ordered to wear masks. The quarantine was not lifted until November 11th. That was the same day World War I ended, but the flu was not finished. Cases continued through the winter and into spring 1919. Nearby Clarkdale reported about 600 cases of its own. Scientific studies later determined that the 1918 to 1921 pandemic killed approximately 0.8% of Arizona's entire population. In Jerome, the death toll was staggering. One source claims that 125 children fell victim to the flu. The hospital struggled to keep up with the dead. According to some accounts, the limited cemetery space became a serious problem. There are unverified stories that bodies had to be cremated because there simply was not room to bury them all. It was during this crisis that the mining company decided Jerome needed a new hospital. A much larger, much more modern facility that could handle whatever disaster came next. If you are enjoying this deep dive into one of America's darkest forgotten places, hit that subscribe button right now. We uncover incredible true stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about American history. The first United Verde hospital, built in 1917, had proven completely inadequate. It was too small to handle the demands of a booming mining town, especially during epidemics. Even worse, the building sat in a geologically unstable area. Dynamite blasting in the mines had struck the nearby Verde Fault. The ground shifted and destroyed the hospital's southern wing. In February 1926, the United Verde Copper Company commissioned plans for a new hospital, one that would be virtually indestructible. They chose a site on solid bedrock at 5,240 feet elevation. The location perched on a 50-degree slope of Mingus Mountain. They hired Lesher and Mahoney, a prestigious Phoenix architectural firm that would eventually complete over 2,500 projects across the Southwest. The building they designed was unlike anything else in Arizona. The new United Verde Hospital was constructed entirely of poured-in-place reinforced concrete. No wood was used in the framework at all. The walls were 18 inches thick in most places. The building was specifically engineered to withstand the daily blasting of 260,000 pounds of dynamite from the nearby mines. It was essentially an above-ground bomb shelter disguised as a Spanish mission-style hospital. The 5-story structure covered 30,000 square feet. It contained 3 fire zones per floor with 6-hour fire breaks between levels. The concrete construction made it virtually fireproof. This was critically important in a town that had burned to the ground multiple times. One contemporary account called it the most modern hospital in Arizona and possibly the western states. The hospital featured equipment that was cutting edge for the 1920s. Arizona's first self-service elevator was installed in October 1926. This Otis model allowed patients to be transported between floors without an operator. The narrow, deep elevator was specifically designed to accommodate hospital gurneys and wheelchairs. A sophisticated Kiwani boiler system provided steam heat throughout the building. X-ray rooms, major and minor surgical facilities, laboratories, emergency backup lighting, an ice-making room, blanket warming closets, a drug dispensary, and patient call lights represented the latest in medical technology. Everything a frontier hospital could possibly need to save lives. The hospital opened in January 1927 with space for approximately 50 patients. There were 4 open wards with 8 beds each, plus private and semi-private rooms. Separate wards housed men, women, and children. Sun porches and balconies allowed recovering patients to enjoy fresh air and spectacular views of the Verde Valley stretching out thousands of feet below. For the next 23 years, this building would be the site of Jerome's greatest tragedies. From the moment it opened, the United Verde Hospital dealt with a constant stream of broken bodies and dying patients. Mining injuries arrived daily. Men with crushed limbs, blast wounds, broken bones, and infections that had turned gangrenous. Surgeons performed amputations regularly. The X-ray room stayed busy examining shattered bones and internal injuries that could not be seen with the naked eye. But the hospital also served the broader needs of Jerome's population. Women gave birth here, some successfully. Many did not make it. Childbirth in the 1920s and 1930s remained extremely dangerous. Maternal mortality rates did not significantly decline until sulfa drugs became available in the mid-1930s. Many women and babies died during or shortly after delivery. Tuberculosis patients came to Arizona hoping the dry climate would cure them. Some ended up at the United Verde Hospital when their condition worsened. The distinctive sound of tuberculosis patients became part of the hospital's daily soundtrack. Labored breathing, persistent coughing, wheezing. These sounds echoed through the concrete hallways day and night. Pneumonia, infectious diseases, workplace accidents, and general illness all funneled through the hospital's doors. With a peak population of 15,000 people, and Jerome being the primary medical facility for the entire mining operation and surrounding area, the caseload was enormous beyond belief. One academic source states that on average, a person died in Jerome each day during peak mining operations. The annual number of deaths and injuries was described as staggering. This brings us to the famous claim that has made this building legendary in paranormal circles. Over 9,000 deaths supposedly occurred within these walls. The number has become central to the Jerome Grand Hotel's haunted reputation today. Paranormal tourism websites cite it constantly. Ghost hunting television shows mention it. Travel guides repeat it without question. But is it actually true? The honest answer is, we do not know for certain. When you examine the claim closely, significant questions emerge. The United Verde Hospital operated for approximately 24 years, from January 1927 until July 1950. If 9,000 people died there, that would mean approximately 375 deaths per year. Roughly one death every single day. The one death per day rate does appear in academic sources describing Jerome during its peak years. The Society of Architectural Historians states that on average, a person died in Jerome each day when the population reached 15,000. However, there are major problems with applying this rate across the entire 24-year period. First, Jerome's population crashed after the Great Depression began in 1929. By the 1930s, the town was shrinking rapidly. By 1953, only 50 to 100 people remained. A hospital serving 50 residents simply could not produce one death per day. Second, normal United States death rates in the 1920s through 1940s averaged 11 to 13 deaths per 1,000 people annually. For a population of 15,000 at normal death rates, you would expect 165 to 195 deaths per year, not 375. Third, Jerome had multiple hospitals over its history, not just the United Verde. The 9,000 figure might conflate deaths from different facilities over different time periods. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, no official records verify the 9,000 number. One paranormal tourism source explicitly acknowledges this. There are no official records available, but according to some, over 9,000 deaths occurred. The skeptical website Haunted US puts it bluntly. Over its functional years, it is said that 9,000 people died at United Verde. Considering the population of Jerome and the hospital's lifespan, that number is unlikely. Notably, the Jerome Grand Hotel's own official history does not claim 9,000 deaths. What we can say with complete confidence is that the United Verde Hospital saw far more death than a typical hospital. The combination of dangerous mining work, epidemic disease, primitive medical technology, and a rough frontier population guaranteed that. Whether the number was 2,000, 5,000, 9,000, or some other figure, this building witnessed an extraordinary amount of human suffering and death. The first hospital, the 1917 building that preceded the current structure, even had an attached morgue in the rear. The presence of such a facility tells you everything about what the doctors expected to encounter. Among all the deaths that occurred at the United Verde Hospital, one stands out because of the mystery surrounding it. On April 3, 1935, maintenance man Claude Harvey was found dead in the hospital basement. His head was pinned beneath the building's famous Otis elevator. Harvey had worked at the hospital for years. He was 63 years old, a familiar figure to the staff and patients. The official ruling was accidental death, but almost immediately, people began to wonder if something else had happened. The elevator was inspected and found to be in perfect working order. One electrical engineer who investigated reportedly concluded that only deliberate sabotage could have caused Harvey's death. Some sources claimed that an autopsy indicated Harvey was already dead before the elevator struck him. Others claimed that no proper autopsy or X-ray was ever performed. Allegedly, the United Verde Copper Company did not want to face potential liability. If Harvey was murdered, who did it, and why? The case was never solved. No arrests were ever made. The death was quietly filed away, and the hospital continued operating as if nothing had happened. But according to believers in the paranormal, Claude Harvey never really left the building. The United Verde Hospital officially closed on July 1, 1950. The reasons were simple. The mines were dying, and so was Jerome. The Great Depression had devastated copper prices. The Little Daisy mine closed in 1938. The United Verde struggled on through World War II when copper demand temporarily spiked. But by 1953, the mines were completely played out. Phelps Dodge Corporation, which had acquired the United Verde holdings in 1935, shut down all operations. Jerome's population collapsed completely. From nearly 15,000 at its peak, the town shrank to somewhere between 50 and 100 residents. Medical services relocated to nearby Cottonwood. Many hospital staff members transferred there as well. But Phelps Dodge did not demolish the hospital. For approximately 20 years after closing, the company maintained the building fully furnished. They hoped that mining might somehow revive or that the facility might be needed for emergencies. The equipment sat untouched. Patient beds remained made. Medical supplies stayed in cabinets gathering dust. In the 1970s and 1980s, Phelps Dodge finally removed most of the furnishings. They hired live-in caretakers to prevent vandalism and watch over the property. Several families lived in the empty hospital during this period. The last caretaker was a local man named Manoah Hofpower. His job was to guard the vacant building from vandals and trespassers. Sometime in the early 1980s, workers found Hofpower hanging from a steam pipe in the engineer's office. His death was ruled a suicide. After that, the building was boarded up completely. Local police and minimal Phelps Dodge staff kept watch, but the hospital sat essentially abandoned for years. Vandals occasionally broke in through weak points in the security. The massive concrete structure began to feel like a tomb. Meanwhile, Jerome itself was undergoing a strange resurrection. When the mines closed, most observers assumed Jerome would simply disappear like so many other ghost towns. Phelps Dodge began demolishing buildings in 1953. Local children earned a penny per brick for removing mortar so materials could be reused elsewhere. The town seemed destined to become nothing but ruins on a mountainside. But the Jerome Historical Society, founded in 1953, fought back hard. Their motto was simple but powerful: "Our past is our future." They successfully halted the demolition campaign in 1956. They opened a mine museum. They branded Jerome as Ghost City, America's largest ghost town. Most remarkably, the society purchased 90 parcels of land from Verde Exploration for a total price of just $10. In 1967, Jerome was designated a National Historic Landmark. The recognition drew attention to the town's remarkably preserved architecture and mining history. Then, the artists arrived and changed everything. During the 1960s and 1970s, painters, sculptors, writers, and various free spirits discovered Jerome. Rent was essentially nothing. The scenery was spectacular. The isolation was appealing to creative types. Abandoned buildings became studios and galleries. Properties purchased for pennies in the 1970s eventually became worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jerome transformed from dying ghost town into thriving bohemian community. Today, more than 30 art galleries and working studios line the streets. Wine tasting rooms have opened, including Caduceus Cellars, owned by Maynard James Keenan of the rock band Tool. Ghost tours capitalize on the town's dark history. The population has stabilized at around 450 to 464 residents. And perched above it all, the old hospital waited for someone to give it new life. In December 1993, a Phoenix businessman named Larry Althor made an offer to Phelps Dodge Corporation. He wanted to buy the abandoned hospital and transform it into something completely different. On May 29, 1994, Althor took possession of the building. What followed was a massive renovation project that would take years to complete. The challenges were enormous beyond belief. The building had sat essentially abandoned for over a decade, but the concrete construction that made it nearly indestructible had also preserved it remarkably well. The bones were solid. The original 1926 Otis elevator was still there. The Q&E boiler system, converted from oil to natural gas, still worked perfectly. Workers excavated over 1,000 dump truckloads of rock and dirt to expand parking from 12 spaces to 70. A full sprinkler and alarm system was installed throughout the entire building. Former patient rooms were converted into guest rooms. The emergency room became the hotel lobby. The dispensary became the Grand View Lounge. In July 1996, the Jerome Grand Hotel opened its doors with its first 6 guest rooms available. By the following year, the Grand View Restaurant and Lounge was serving guests. In 2003, the award-winning Asylum restaurant opened in the building. Today, the hotel offers multiple room types across its 5 floors. The Grand Suite is approximately 2,000 square feet with 2 master bedrooms, a living room, full kitchen, and an 1898 Steinway piano. It occupies the entire north wing of the 3rd floor. The original Otis elevator still operates, carrying guests at the leisurely pace of 50 feet per minute. The original Q&E boiler still provides steam heat. The original General Electric motors, now over 90 years old, still run the vacuum pumps. Larry Althair remains the owner along with his brother Robert. They have worked to preserve the building's history while making it comfortable for modern guests. But the Althairs also discovered something else. The hospital's haunted reputation was a major draw for certain types of guests. Almost from the moment the Jerome Grand Hotel opened, guests began reporting strange experiences. These reports accumulated into thick binders that still sit at the lobby desk today. 5 notebooks containing approximately 300 pages each of paranormal testimonials collected since 1996. The most commonly reported phenomena are sounds. Guests describe hearing labored breathing, wheezing, and coughing from empty rooms. Sounds associated with the tuberculosis patients who once filled the wards. Crying babies echo through the 3rd and 4th floors. The squeak of hospital gurney wheels rolls down hallways at night. Footsteps pound through corridors when no one is there. Doors open and close on their own. Visual sightings are less common, but still frequently reported. Guests describe shadow figures moving through hallways and stairwells. Apparitions include a male doctor carrying a clipboard, a female nurse in period uniform, and a female patient in a hospital gown. A bearded man reportedly frequents the 3rd floor. A ghost child has been seen running up and down the hallway and appearing at the foot of beds. One of the strangest and most consistent phenomena involves a phantom cat. Guests and staff report feeling a cat brushing against their legs. They hear meowing, purring, hissing, and scratching at doors. Some guests claim the cat snuggles up with them in bed, leaving a visible impression in the bedding. In 2008, a guest in room 20 allegedly captured a clear photograph of a cat sitting on a table. The photo is reportedly kept at the front desk for visitors to examine. Physical phenomena include sudden temperature drops that cannot be explained, objects moving on their own with shampoo bottles rolling or flying across rooms, televisions and lamps turning on and off by themselves, the mysterious relocation of personal items. Multiple guests have reported finding their cell phones and cameras inexplicably moved to dead center under the bed. Unexplained smells add another layer to the experiences. Guests report the scent of cigars despite smoking being prohibited throughout the entire building. Others smell whiskey, flowers, antiseptic, baby powder, and zinc oxide. Room 32 has earned the reputation as the hotel's most haunted room. According to legend, 2 people committed suicide in this room. A wheelchair-bound miner who somehow climbed the balcony and fell to his death, and a businessman who shot himself. Guests in room 32 report doors opening and closing, faucets turning on by themselves, unexplained breathing sounds, and apparitions appearing at the foot of the bed. Some ghost hunters specifically request this room. Others specifically avoid it at all costs. The 3rd floor overall is described as by far the most active floor. This was the location of the operating rooms, which may explain the concentration of reported activity. The basement and boiler room are associated with the deaths of Claude Harvey and caretaker Manoa Hofpoier. Shadow figures are regularly reported in these areas. Staff on the graveyard shift claim to see Harvey's shadow walking upstairs or roaming around as if still working on his maintenance duties. The elevator itself, where Harvey died, generates its own stories. Guests report the elevator moving between floors without passengers inside, doors opening and closing on their own. The sensation of unseen hands brushing against people standing nearby. During the years the building sat abandoned, locals claimed they could hear the elevator groaning and moving, even though it supposedly never actually operated during that period. The Jerome Grand Hotel's haunted reputation eventually attracted professional paranormal investigators and television cameras. On February 25, 2011, The Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures aired an episode titled Jerome Grand Hotel. Investigators Zach Baggins, Nick Groff, and Aaron Goodwin spent a night exploring the building with night vision cameras and electronic detection equipment. According to the show's documentation, Aaron reported feeling many spirits walking around him while in the morgue area. Zach detected a static force surrounding him near the attic. The team captured what they described as a mist on the thermal camera in the shape of an orb in the attic. The show returned for a second investigation during Paranormal Challenge, a competition series that pitted amateur ghost hunting teams against each other. The Jerome Grand Hotel episode served as the series finale. Not everyone was impressed by the findings. One skeptical reviewer noted that there were a lot of scraping noises, some rumbles, and other bumps going on, but there is nothing to say those were paranormal. It could have been the building settling, the wind, people walking around, or something more earthly. This skepticism points to legitimate alternative explanations for many reported phenomena. The building uses a steam heating system that causes pipes to bang and clang during the night. The 1926 structure naturally settles and shifts. The old elevator mechanisms produce distinctive sounds that could easily be mistaken for something supernatural. The building's clinical layout and wide corridors create an eerie atmosphere that can affect suggestible visitors. The high altitude of 5,200 feet might even affect some guests, physically causing dizziness or disorientation. But the testimonials continue to accumulate year after year. In 2017, 3 digital producers from Phoenix television station 12 News spent a night in room 32. They used electromagnetic field readers, frequency cycling radios, infrared cameras, and even an Ouija board. Their conclusion was appropriately ambiguous. The reality of what spirits may or may not exist inside room 32 is something you must experience yourself to believe if you dare. Today, the Jerome Grand Hotel embraces its haunted reputation while still functioning as a legitimate hotel. Ghost hunt packages are offered on select weeknights for $30 per adult or $20 per child. Participants receive electromagnetic field meters, infrared thermometers, and digital cameras to conduct their own investigations. Room rates are discounted 10% for ghost hunting participants. The hotel maintains those thick notebooks of guest experiences at the front desk. Photos of alleged ghost sightings, including the famous ghost cat, are displayed for visitors to examine and judge for themselves. But the hotel is also simply a nice place to stay. The Asylum restaurant has earned an award of excellence from Wine Spectator magazine. The views from the mountainside location are genuinely spectacular. Guests can see the red rocks of Sedona in the distance and the San Francisco peaks 50 miles to the north. TripAdvisor ranks it in the top 10% of properties and number 1 of the 2 hotels in Jerome. The original equipment adds historical appeal beyond any paranormal interest. That 1926 Otis elevator, the one where Claude Harvey died, still carries guests between floors every single day. A 1928 Rolls-Royce Phantom was added to the hotel garage in 2003. It occasionally appears in parades and shows around the region. Jerome itself has become a genuine tourist destination, drawing visitors from around the world. The former Wickedest Town in the West now features art galleries instead of brothels, wine tasting rooms instead of opium dens. The Jerome Sliding Jail, a concrete cell block that moved 225 feet down the hill after underground blasting in 1938, has become a quirky landmark. The Douglas Mansion, built by mining magnate James Douglas in 1916, is now Jerome State Historic Park. Ghost tours operate throughout the town, not just at the hotel. Jerome has fully embraced its dual identity as both a living community of artists and craftspeople and a preserved relic of one of Arizona's wildest chapters in history. Strip away the ghost stories and the tourism marketing, and what remains is something genuinely remarkable and genuinely tragic. The United Verde Hospital was built to save lives in one of America's most dangerous places. For 23 years, doctors and nurses worked in this building, trying to patch together miners broken by cave-ins, explosions, and falls. They delivered babies to families who might lose a father to the mines any day. They treated tuberculosis patients slowly suffocating as their lungs failed. They watched epidemic disease sweep through the community, filling their beds with dying patients faster than they could be treated. Did 9,000 people die here? Almost certainly not that exact number, but thousands did. The hospital saw a level of death and suffering that would be almost unimaginable in modern medicine. Every day brought fresh casualties from the mines. Every epidemic brought waves of the dying. The first hospital even had its own morgue attached because death was such a constant companion in this wild frontier town. The men who built this building understood that reality. They made it virtually indestructible because they expected it to stand for generations. They installed the best equipment they could buy because they knew their patients would need every advantage. They positioned it on the most stable ground they could find because the previous hospital had already been damaged by the very blasting that created their patients. Today, that building still stands as solid as the day it was completed. The concrete walls that were designed to survive 260,000 pounds of dynamite have survived almost a century. The elevator that carried bleeding miners and dying flu victims still carries tourists seeking a brush with the supernatural. The boiler that kept patients warm through mountain winters still heats the guest rooms where people sleep tonight. And according to some, the patients themselves are still there, watching from the shadows. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the Jerome Grand Hotel represents something powerful. A physical connection to a vanished world of copper miners, frontier medicine, and the raw danger of industrial America. The building itself is the ghost in many ways, a massive concrete reminder of all the lives that pass through its doors, some to healing and some to death. The hotel's website makes no claims about 9,000 deaths. It does not need to. The true story of the wickedest town in the West is dramatic enough without embellishment. The billion-dollar copper camp. The men who descended into burning mine tunnels every day, the doctors who tried to save them, the epidemics that swept through the population, the slow death of a town, and the strange resurrection that followed. If you visit today, you can sleep in rooms where patients once struggled for breath. You can ride the elevator where a man either fell to his death or was murdered in a case that remains unsolved. You can walk hallways where nurses once rushed to emergencies. You can look out windows at the same view that dying miners saw in their final days. Whether any of them are still there watching back is a question only you can answer for yourself. The Jerome Grand Hotel sits at 5,240 feet elevation. It is the highest commercial building in the Verde Valley. From its windows and balconies, guests look out over one of the most dramatic landscapes in America. The valley floor spreads thousands of feet below. Red rock formations glow in the distance. On clear days, the San Francisco peaks rise on the horizon, still snow-capped in spring. It is easy to understand why miners came here, despite the terrible danger. The wealth beneath Cleopatra Hill changed lives forever. It created fortunes that seemed impossible. It built an empire of copper that powered the electrical revolution, transforming America. It also killed them by the hundreds, perhaps by the thousands, in cave-ins and explosions, in fires and falls, in epidemics and workplace accidents, in childbirth and disease. They came to Jerome seeking fortune and found death instead. The hospital on the mountainside tried desperately to save them. Sometimes it succeeded. Often it failed. The bodies piled up so many that the first hospital needed an attached morgue. So many that during the flu epidemic there may not have been room to bury them all. Now, tourists come seeking something different, a chance to touch that history, to feel the weight of all those deaths, perhaps to encounter something that lingers from those terrible years when this building ran red with blood and echoed with screams. The Jerome Grand Hotel offers that opportunity to anyone brave enough or curious enough to take it. It is a comfortable, well-maintained hotel with spectacular views and good food. It is also a building soaked in tragedy where the walls absorb decades of suffering and death that most people today cannot even imagine. Whether the dead still walk those halls is something no one can prove with absolute certainty. But the building itself remains standing, massive, silent, and waiting, a monument to one of America's wildest chapters and all the lives it consumed without mercy. Before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We dive into incredible forgotten stories like this every single week. Stories that will make you see American history in a completely different light. And if you made it this far, drop a comment telling us whether you would spend the night in room 32. Would you be brave enough to sleep where so many people died? The next time you book a hotel room, you might want to ask which floor has the most paranormal activity. Or you might want to avoid knowing that information entirely. Either way, you will be sleeping in a place where thousands came before you hoping to be healed. Not all of them left alive. And some say not all of them ever really left at all.